Well, welcome to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Big Tom Perkins, along with Dr. Cameron Meyerly. And I know you've been lambing like crazy. We're pretty much, well, we're done with this group, we think. We have a few stragglers that we don't think time-wise, unless they're going to just carry them till next year for February.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty much through the woods now and certainly envious of that. This is one of those situations where again, you have a conversation about using cedars. We've talked about that previously and kind of kicking myself this morning. We had a ewe that lambed when we sorted everybody off, had checked udders, and there were a couple that you said, "Oh, well, these are a good ways out from the ones that are getting ready to go in the next week." And then turns out we've been lambing long enough that we've hit that point of a good ways out. And so Cameron's out there chasing a couple of lambs in the field and not concerned. Those those lambs were doing fine and looking healthy, a little sun dried by the time I got to them. So probably a better environment that I would prefer to lamb in, a little bit cleaner, and just some open air facilities there. But caught those, got them into a jug, and actually I can't take credit for that. I was chasing them around, and Dad helped get them into the barn. But the yeah, it's been a long lambing season, it feels like, and we're getting ready to start here probably in another 2 weeks. Start the Texel flock lambing, so it's going to continue to drag on, and who knows when our ewe lambs are gonna gonna start gonna start popping. But that was another situation when you look at management or mismanagement, and the classic phrase of uh, "do as I say, not as I do" situation. But that was didn't have grass. We sent ewes to a solar site and sent a ram with them. So any of those sheep that maybe recycled, slipped a lamb, whatever happened, we're assuming are bred in that later window, and
Mhm.
those came home pretty late. So we might be lambing here for a while, but I'd say the main heat of it, the bulk of the lambs are here, and now the annoying part of just dragging on and one every couple of days lambing has started, which is not fun. Nobody
No,
likes to do that. So
no, I believe that. So last week we were talking with Andrew. He was talking about all the triplets he had. How was your how's your triplet situation going?
well, yeah, when we were talking with Andrew, hadn't had a single one yet. So, and that was okay by me. It was a situation where I kind of assumed, talking with some other producers in the area, again, environment playing a significant role in our reproductive capabilities. Had kind of assumed we'd be at lower lambing percentage than what we had seen in the past, and a lot of twins, a handful of singles here and there, but just our percentage of twins I thought was exceptionally high, which is fantastic. If
Hmm.
I think if most of us had the option to select what we would want, it would be all of our ewes having twins. Now,
Yep.
physio physiologically, we know that is not it's not how it works. And so it was kind of interesting to hear Andrew talking on our last episode. I think they've had eight, maybe nine sets of triplets, but
Yeah.
like two singles. And we know from a math standpoint, to get to 200%, if we have nine sets of triplets, I can have nine singles,
And still be
everything else is
200.
twins, and I
Yep.
end up right on that 200% mark. So it makes sense. The math actually works out. It's not surprising. When he had mentioned his lambing percentage is like 227 or 223, I don't remember the exact number. And it's like, oh man, that is painful to listen to. And it's not, you're happy for him. And he made a comment in there that it really should resonate with sheep producers, something that resonated with me and I've been thinking about it for the last week now, but if you're going to have a 220 whatever percent lamb crop, you need to be prepared for it.
Yep.
And whether you're having 9 triplets and 9 singles to hit your 200% mark, that's something that, Tom, you're pretty successful at getting these lambs grafted from those triplet ewes
Yep.
onto those single ewes. And that's something I would really like to improve. If I had a skill set or a specific skill that I would like to improve on, grafting lambs would be one of them. And I think it is a huge advantage. I've gotten it to work a couple of times, but we probably don't try as much as we should. And that it's just something that, again, you have to be prepared for it. And if you're not going to go the grafting route, or your grafting route doesn't work, well, what's your plan B?
Hmm.
Plan B in that situation is going to be artificially rearing those lambs
Yep.
on your own. And so, talking with Tom, we had 2 sets of triplets. I'm assuming is what they ended up being. Very easily could have been a set of 4 and a set of 2, and they were in a pile, and everybody wanted to take care of everybody, and until they don't, and that's where you sit there and you get to that kind of 12-hour mark, 24-hour mark, and all of a sudden that ewe's beaten up on one, and you're like, you were licking this thing this morning. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And sheep are not. There are some individual uniqueness to them, and so you have the one ewe. She is a ewe that she would just about climb over the gate to get to hay that you're feeding other sheep. Like, if you're feeding the rest of the group, she would want to push her gate over and run over and eat. Just a very, what I would call, a very passionate individual in
Hmm.
anything she does. And so, Lord forbid that there is another lamb out of a different ewe in her jug, even if she wanted to take care of it that morning, she would have killed the thing.
Huh.
And very aggressive behavior towards it. So, all that to say, we are in the bottle lamb business, and it is one of the business ventures that I do not enjoy. It is not my favorite part of raising sheep. Uh, I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, my bottle lambs, you can't tell the difference between my bottle lambs and my rail lambs. To which, my thought is, well, maybe your ewes aren't very good, or and
Yeah.
that's probably more the spiteful thought process from me. But growing up, we'd always have, one here or another one there, and a lot of credit to my grandmother. She a pseudo bottom lamb expert. One of those that really put the time into. Well, in the first week of life, we're going to feed every 4 hours. Well, in the,
Hmm.
in the second week of life, we're going to feed every 5 hours, 6 hours. And it was never well, we'll feed in the AM and we'll feed in the PM, and trying to allow some of that to rub off on me. We have been burning the candle at both ends and trying to make sure we're getting bottles into those lambs frequently. Lower feeding amounts, lower quantities of milk, but higher frequencies of delivering it. And
Yeah.
so, that's just something that we're still feeding a bottle. I've seen lambs on a bucket. If that's your cup of tea, great. I've seen very thrifty bottle lambs on a bucket. I don't have a problem with that. But when we have two, I just struggle with, is it worth, like, what's the threshold of setting up that bucket? Or a lot of people now have a milk machine, and something that in the future maybe we look at. But how many lambs does it take that you set up the milk machine that it's worth it? So it really got me thinking, talking with Andrew too. 9 sets of triplets, at some point do you just start pulling them off, and you're planning to have anything over two, we're going to try to graft on the singles that are born. And when they don't work out, well, we're going to have bottle lambs. In
Yep.
that situation, when you only have two singles to graft onto, and you've mentioned some issue with this year of, well, I have this extra lamb that's not doing as well as what I'd like, but I don't have any singles that are lambing in any timeline that fits to
Yep.
try to graft these lambs over. So is it easier maybe to even just look at try to master the artificial rearing, the bottle lambing side of things, and forget about maybe not forget about, but that's part of your plan A and plan A dash one
Hmm.
of saying, if there's a single there, great. Like if it's convenient, we're going to try it. If it's not, we're not going to work real hard at trying to force to graft a lamb. We're just going to be really good at keeping bottle lambs alive. But kind of what's your philosophy, Tom, with triplets, and how do you approach that with your operation?
Anytime we've had triplets, I'll usually grab the smallest one and I'll put it on a single. And we just don't, we just haven't had an issue with it. And in the past, I've always had enough singles with a lamb that was within a few days of that triplet that it hasn't been a big deal. And we've just put, we made these, I made these head gates and that you cannot look behind her. She can't tell what lamb's there. And I put her in that head gate for 3 days, and that lamb and her own lamb is on her for 3 days. And you let them out, and she just takes care of them. We leave them in the jug for a little while to make sure that's going to stick, and then they're just acting like a set of twins after that. This year, we had twins, 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 triplets, twins, 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 twins. I'm
Right.
like, I need a single.
Yeah. Yeah, and you don't say that too
I
often.
know, I know. I'm really wanting a single. And no, I ended up putting that ewe in with her triplets in in the first mothering pen, and they did fine. And we put them in the bigger pen, and yesterday we noticed this little tiny lamb and way smaller than the rest, and we went and got a hold of it, and it was one of the trips. And we went and found the other two trips, and holy crud, they were like 3 times the size of that one. And that bothers me. Is like, how do I keep missing this little lamb? Because I always go in and try to look at all the lambs, but even once I found it, we finished feeding, and then we went to find it again. It was way curled up in this corner with some other lambs, and I'm like, I know it's here. We could hardly see it. It was so small compared to everybody else. But but that one didn't make it, and it irks me. And I'm
You
thinking,
just maybe caught it too late.
I did catch it too late, so I probably should have, because I didn't have a ewe to graft her onto. I should have tried the bottle feeder. But we only have ever done bottle feeding with a set of twins that the ewe had a uh, uterine prolapse, and we lost the ewe. And so I sent that home with CJ, sent those twins home with CJ's family, and those twins came back at, I think, 30 days or 40 days, something like that. And we had weaned them, and they were small, and they just stayed small.
Hmm.
They never did do well. And some guy pulled up my driveway looking for a couple of lambs he wanted to put in his yard. He wasn't
Just to
interested in
keep
breeding
grass down.
them. He just wanted to see them play in his yard. His yard was all fenced in, and that's what he wanted. It was like a backyard, and that's what he wanted. And I said, "Yo, I got the perfect two lambs for you.
These will work. Yep.
These will work." I said, "If you don't ever plan on breeding them," I said, "I don't see why they need to ever grow to full size." No,
Right.
but that's what happened to them, and I sold them pretty cheap just to be rid of them. But Yeah,
Yeah.
I've done everything I can to swear off bottle lambs. I don't have a bottle. I don't have milk replacer. I don't even know how it's supposed to be mixed up. Um, I know too that we have really extremely hard water, extremely
Mm.
hard. Every water company that we've ever come in here to test our water to try to sell us one of their fancy water softener kits have all said ours won't work. We've never seen water this hard.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And back when we were milking cows, our spring dried up and we had to drill a well and we started to use this. A company came in and said, "Yeah, we could probably make this work, but you would have to change out everything every day
Wow.
because it would just plug up that bad." And so when I was raising bottle calves, because when I first came home to the farm here in '96, that's what I did. I went to sale barns and bought bottle calves, brought those home.
How much
Um,
were they then, Tom?
for a whole calf, it was $12.50.
And those were Holstein calves.
Those were Holstein calves. We call
Yeah.
them day old calves, but they could have been as much as a week old. Yeah, it's $12.50. And I can't remember what I paid for milk replacer, but within a few years, milk replacer price had like tripled. And so I went in with another gal who had a dairy farm, and we would buy like a ton of milk replacer at a time because we could get it cheaper that way. And it would come on a pallet. But she could feed her calves 2 bottles of milk for each feeding, and they just grew like bad weeds. And if I couldn't even feed mine a whole bottle because they would scour so bad. And the only difference was my water.
Could
And
have been the
so
same milk replacer as
it was,
what your
it
neighbor
was,
was
yeah, it
using.
was the same milk replacer, mixed it the same way, did everything the same way, but mine scoured so bad, and we both decided that, and she was a pretty good dairy farmer, and we both decided it had to be that water.
Mm.
It had to be that water was so bad. And so I have just said, what's the point? I mean, geez, if I can't keep a calf from scouring, how am I going to keep a lamb from scouring?
Right.
And so you and I were talking earlier, and I thought, well, if I have to do this, I suppose I could go buy, gallon jugs of water or 2.5 gallon jug. Our store has those too, and
Yeah.
kind of get those lambs started on that. But I don't even know where to go buy milk replacer. I don't even know what kind of milk replacer to buy. I've never
Yeah.
looked into any of this.
And so on the nice thing with lambs versus a calf is you could have the opportunity to go to the store and buy water, and it could probably be cost effective versus, and it may still be cost effective on the calf side of things, but the quantity
It would
of
take
the
a lot.
volume,
Yeah, it would take a lot of water.
you take a lot of bottles to do a calf is my thought. And the
Yeah.
reason I had asked, you bring up a good point with the bottle fed calves. And I was curious, the reason I asked you how much you were paying back then is because I just pulled up the Mount Hope report, and it's pretty accurate with what we're seeing across the Midwest for the
Yeah.
price and maybe everywhere else, but I'm not going to speak to that. Average the top 50 Holstein bull calves average $754 per head.
Mm.
And those are back to the farm calves. And those are the Holstein calves. I don't know where the uh oh, here we go. The crossbred black bull calves. So those would
Oh,
be beef on dairy
were those
calves.
$1,000?
The top 40 averaged $1,000.20. And
Oh my goodness.
the range for 80 pounders to 125 pounders, 800 to 1250
Yeah.
per head.
Yeah.
And so, I'm of the opinion that bottle feeding is more art than it is science. And if I am, it is one thing to try to save a lamb that right then and there does not have value. Um,
Hmm.
that's significant. That's maybe long term if we can get them to wait, we have that value. I can't take that lamb to the sale barn and get $1,000 for it,
No.
which is insane. You have to remember that there are operations that their entire production model is I go to the sale barn, I buy the calves, I start the calves, some finish those calves. Well, death loss on an
Yeah.
$800 dairy calf that's a bottle calf that they're susceptible to everything as well. Like we're not talking about an animal that's bulletproof. It would be a scary, scary industry to be a part of right now because your death loss, your profitability is won and lost in the death loss category.
Oh, it has to
And
be. So when I did this with bottle calves, and the main reason I was doing bottle calves because I was on a shoestring budget, and so I would go to the sale barn, I'd buy these calves, and they weren't the best calves there, but that first 2 years, maybe in the first 3 years, the average price on those calves came out to $12.50, and I would bring those calves home. And all I was trying to do was get those calves weaned onto a sweet feed as quickly as possible. As soon as I get that calf to eat 1 pound of sweet feed per day, 3 days in a row, that was the end of the milk replacer because
mm,
because I was constantly right on the verge of those things scouring. And once they started scouring, you had a heck of a time turning them around again. But I raised those calves to 400 pounds and would sell those calves. They averaged like 50 cents a pound. So I started off at 12.50, pretty much guaranteeing myself a calf for 200. It's
yep,
what how much money do I put into it between there? I could lose a calf here and there because it was only $12.50 I was losing.
right,
Still in that bracket. And that worked for quite a while, and then the calf prices started coming up. And when calves got up to around 125 to $150, I couldn't absorb the loss anymore.
right.
So
And
that's
I'm
that's
just
when I got out of it.
you were talking about it. I was like, I know they're high. I didn't realize they were this
Oh yeah.
high.
I
I
was
heard
talking
the
I was talking to a
758
guy from
number.
yeah, I was talking to a guy from Wisconsin. I think he told me they milk 400, 500 cows. There's a guy that comes up uh twice a week from Texas. Maybe they're milking more cows than that. But he buys every calf that hits the ground, and I think it was $800 and hauls them back to Texas. And
Crazy.
I wonder how many die on the way to Texas
Oh, sure.
from Wisconsin.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know how they I don't know. I don't understand how these guys making any money on these.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And that's
you go back to your lambs, it's we're not actually buying the lamb, so it probably so we don't have that expense. But I
yeah,
know
that
with
is
mine, I look too where I'm thinking, this triplet that I lost was pretty good genetics.
right.
And I'm kind of kicking myself and thinking I probably should have tried to do something different.
And
Maybe,
that's a situation where it's loss of potential
yeah,
profit versus this is like directly tied to it. That was a
yeah.
ewe lamb that you lost, bred really, really well. And you say, if we can get supplementation into that lamb, if we can artificially rear that lamb and then do everything right, maybe she doesn't look great, maybe she doesn't look good enough to breed as a lamb. I'm not telling you need to keep all your bottle lambs, but from a genetic piece, maybe she has some value next year. And when she looks maybe a little rough at that 6 month age,
Mm,
is it a function of genetics or is it a function of environment?
yeah. I
That's a
almost
function of environment.
Yeah, as I look back on this, the kick of myself, all morning here, but the I think back on it and I'm thinking, well, maybe I should have pulled one of these crossbred lambs and it should have been bottle
Mm.
fed and I could have put this ewe lamb on that ewe.
And there's a lot of philosophy to this. And I think that's, yeah, I don't think your thinking is flawed. in that regard, because you look at what the value of that crossbred lamb is versus the value of the your seed stock lamb that you lost,
Yeah.
and you say, you know, maybe some hybrid vigor helps this crossbred lamb out, in the that bottle feeding process, post bottle feeding, once you
Yeah.
wean it. And you do kind of sit and wonder. It's all about, and again, going back to Andrew's comment about being prepared
Yep.
for those triplets, being prepared to have a bottle lamb. And I'll tell you, like, if you don't have the milk replacer, if you don't have the bottle, the equipment to do it all last minute, I'm not going to guarantee it. Your chances at being successful are
Pretty
limited.
slim. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm of the opinion too, whether you're freezing your own colostrum, which would be the preferable, we would we would say that's better than the store-bought colostrum. But when you are buying that store-bought colostrum, paying attention to what those antibody levels are, paying attention to it being a specific sheep colostrum, as
Hmm.
opposed to, and the same goes for our milk replacer, as opposed to being an all stock or a all species livestock milk replacer.
Yeah.
We want to be very specific on our sheep specific milk replacers. And you were talking brands and where to go and what to select for, and that's one of those controversial topics for people that again are prepared and have done this and are doing it frequently on what they prefer to use. So
Yeah,
we're
I've heard discussions, or I've read discussions, because you can't hear Facebook, you just read it.
right.
But
Right.
that I read on Facebook, a big discussion about different nipples to use on bottles.
Mm.
And then it kind of starts to become this kind of overwhelming process. And I say, you know what? Because I'm so overwhelmed, I'm just going to be a purist, and these sheep are going to have to raise their own lamb.
I don't know that that's a bad approach, because we've had debates within, as I mentioned, grandma has raised a number of bottle lambs. We've had debates within our own family of, what bottles are best and what nipples best and so on and so forth. The dinner conversation that nobody wants to hear, unless they knew
Yeah.
the context
Yeah.
of what you're talking about. But it's preference on nipples, and it's convenient. The Pritchard nipple that, talking about a tongue twister here, we're gonna get all tied up. But
Yeah.
it's a screw top, goes right on a 20-ounce Coke bottle, and those are easy. In my opinion, there are some lamp, and those are vented. They've got a little air exchange there in the cap that makes a difference. We've used some rubber nipples, or latex, probably nipples, that slip over a glass bottle. I suppose they could slip over a plastic pop bottle as well, but the glass is a little bit easier to clean and keep
Yeah.
sanitized. We're usually going through those pop bottles and throwing them away at the end of the week, still washing them out. But how many times can you wash
And
a
and you're
plastic pop
using
bottle out?
okay, so you're using the plastic ones. Yeah, I haven't seen glass bottles for quite a while.
Yeah, it's a specialty. Like, run to the Rural King, get a root beer in the glass bottle. But
Ooh,
um,
okay.
those, and you can do that and keep that glass bottle around because it withstands. I'm able to sanitize
Hmm.
that bottle
Yeah.
quite a bit easier than I can the plastic bottle. And that's one of the things when we talk about bottle lambs, the sanitation. We
Yeah.
want to try to keep a clean area. We want to try to have clean equipment. And I know there are people that I've heard that have way more experience than I do. Have heard them talk about the need for sanitation in their automatic
Hmm.
milkers.
Yeah.
So cleaning the tubes and cleaning the nipples and all of the mechanism that delivers that that artificial milk to those lambs has to be cleaned every day or every 48 hours, and it comes down to preference. Well, if you're not willing to do that, I would venture out and say probably not going to have a successful crop of bottle lambs. And
Hmm.
again, it's those that are depending on those milk machines tend to have kind of an SOP or a standard operating procedure with how they deal with those weak lambs, how they
Yeah.
deal with those triplets. And in a lot of cases, I know we've toured some farms that they have triplets, they're pulling one off. And they're finding the two that match up the best and then pulling the one that's the outlier. So maybe there's
Yeah.
two medium-sized lambs and a giant lamb. Well, they're going to pull off the big lamb and leave the mediums. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying, you hear people talk like that and you say, man, they've really thought about this and
Yeah.
maybe I need to think about this a little more in depth. Uh, I will say, now we're we're getting pretty picky on we're already feeding two lambs. So like if I see one falling behind and that just maybe hunkered up doesn't look great, um, I'm I'm more willing to pull that one off. I'm not saying I should be, but more willing to pull that one off now because my time is already committed to feeding that bottle to those other two.
Yeah.
I should be willing, whether I have 10 or if I have zero, to
Hmm.
pull that one off if that's what it's going to take. But yeah, it is something that is part of raising sheep, especially sheep that have the potential to lamb in excess of that 200% mark. Um, and unfortunately, even if you're lambing on an average of 150% lamb crop, you're probably still going to be dealing with it. So unfortunately,
Yeah.
I wish you
Yeah.
didn't have to, but
I think we've just been lucky in the past because we've always had a single somewhere. It's always
to
within a,
graft,
yeah, always within a day or so, we just graft them on.
yeah.
And
And this is
it
something
wasn't,
like
it was never that difficult to do for us. But
to
the
go and toot to go and toot Tom's horn for him because he's not going to. In terms of grafting lambs, I have talked to very few people outside of Tom that graft as many lambs as what he does and grafts them successfully. I mean, the amount of success that you guys have had, I think it's something that you've figured that out, you've worked towards it, and you have a kind of a standard operating procedure of how you go about that, what you look for, and to capture it and write a book about it. I think would be difficult, but I think it's an innate skill set that, as I mentioned at the start of this, I've met very few people that graft as many as what Tom does successfully. So that's something you got to lean into that skill, and maybe that's if you say, man, I don't want to learn to be an expert bottle lamb feeder, but I want to
Mhm.
learn how to graft lambs really, really well. And we have sheep that I can graft lambs onto really, really well.
Yeah, this has been the only time it didn't work out that we have a single. You know, it was odd
Right?
wishing. It was odd wishing for a single. It really
Yeah.
was. But
Yeah. I could definitely see that. And I'm sure we will catch flack and don't want to pretend that not aware that if I'm pulling all of my triplets off, the biggest question is, well, how do you find the ewes that can raise triplets and
hmm
raise them well? It's a great question.
Yeah.
And um,
You need
that's
you just need to monitor them much more closely than I did this last set of triplets. And really,
right.
then
And
then
it's
you can tell who's doing well. And I wonder too if you wouldn't be further ahead, maybe to I don't know. I was gonna say pull those ewes out and put them in a separate group and feed them a little better. So
commercial
you're,
operation,
so you're
100%.
yeah, so you're sure she's making the milk.
And you're sure this is my pen of triplet rearing ewes. We know that their nutrient requirements are in excess of those feeding twins.
Yep.
I also know if I see a lamb, I'm gonna look at that pen probably a little more closely
Mm.
than I would my single and twin bearing ewe pen. And if I see something in there that that could be an issue, well, I can pull it out because I know why it's an issue.
Mhm.
I'm looking for those issues in that pen. It causes some issues when we think about contemporary